Veteran and dog explored a forgotten bunker. What they found inside shocked the country. You're about to witness one of the most incredible discoveries in American military history, a story so extraordinary it will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Cold War and the heroes who protected us in silence. This discovery didn't just uncover buried secrets. It revealed a network of unsung patriots whose sacrifices were hidden for over half a century. If this remarkable journey moves you like it moved us, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our extraordinary stories. Trust me, what you're about to discover will leave you absolutely speechless and forever change how you view American heroism. Let's dive into this life-changing adventure. The November wind cut through the Pennsylvania hills like a blade, carrying with it the scent of approaching winter and the promise of the first real snow of the season. Staff Sergeant Danny Rodriguez pulled his jacket tighter as he walked the eastern boundary of his late grandfather's farm, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp morning air. At 31, the former Army combat engineer had seen enough harsh weather during his 4 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, but there was something different about the cold in these Appalachian foothills near Gettysburg. It felt clean, peaceful, and mercifully free from the constant threat of improvised explosive devices. Danny had inherited the sprawling 380-acre property 18 months ago when his grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez, passed away at the age of 96. The old man had been a fixture in the local community for over 60 years, known as a quiet, hard-working farmer who kept to himself and rarely spoke about his past. The property had been in the Rodriguez family since 1947, purchased with money Miguel had somehow accumulated during his brief stint in the army during World War II, though he'd always been vague about the details of his military service. Trotting alongside Danny was his constant companion, a 6-year-old Belgian Malinois named Thor. The dog had been Danny's military working dog partner for 3 years before Danny's medical discharge following a roadside bomb explosion that left him with a traumatic brain injury, chronic pain from shrapnel wounds, and hearing loss in his left ear. When Danny left the service, the army had allowed him to adopt Thor, recognizing the therapeutic bond between the veteran and his 4-legged partner. Thor was more than just a pet. He was a highly trained detection specialist who had served with distinction in some of the most dangerous areas of the Middle East. The dog was trained in explosive detection, narcotics identification, human tracking, and tactical support operations. Even in retirement, Thor maintained the alert, purposeful demeanor of a working military dog, constantly scanning his environment for threats or anomalies. On this particular morning, Danny was conducting his weekly inspection of the property's perimeter fencing, checking for damage from the severe storms that had battered the region the previous week. The weather had been unusually harsh for November, with high winds and driving rain that had knocked down several large trees and caused minor flooding in the lower areas of the farm. Thor was ranging about 30 yards ahead, following scent trails and investigating areas where wildlife had been active, when he suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. Danny immediately recognized the behavior. This wasn't casual interest or playful exploration. Thor had gone into what Danny knew as detection mode, body rigid, ears forward, head slightly lowered, and his entire focus concentrated on something specific. "Thor, what have you got, boy?" Danny called out, quickening his pace toward his partner. The dog was focused on an area near a cluster of large oak trees, about 200 yards from the main farmhouse. As Danny approached, he could see that recent storms had caused significant erosion in this section of the property. A small ravine had been carved out by running water, and several large trees had been uprooted, their massive root systems creating deep craters in the earth. Thor was standing perfectly still, staring at what appeared to be a section of exposed concrete that had been revealed when one of the oak trees fell over. The concrete was dark with age and partially covered by mud and debris, but it was clearly man-made. and appeared to be part of a larger structure buried beneath the surface. Danny knelt down beside Thor and began carefully clearing away mud, leaves, and broken branches from around the concrete. As he worked, more of the structure became visible. It appeared to be the corner of a substantial concrete installation, with what looked like reinforcing steel bars visible in the construction. "What the hell, Thor?" Danny muttered, running his hands along the smooth concrete surface. "Grandpa never mentioned anything about construction projects out here." Thor remained in detection posture, occasionally whining softly in the way he did when he'd found something significant, but wasn't sure what his handler wanted him to do about it. Danny had learned to trust Thor's instincts completely during their military service together. The dog's nose and training had saved their unit from ambushes and hidden explosives more times than Danny could count. Danny spent the next 2 hours carefully excavating around the exposed concrete, using tools from his grandfather's well-stocked barn. The more he uncovered, the more intrigued he became. This wasn't just a random piece of concrete. It was clearly part of a sophisticated underground structure. The construction was military-grade, with thick, reinforced walls and what appeared to be waterproofing materials, designed to keep moisture out of whatever lay beneath. Danny found drainage systems, ventilation pipes, and what looked like electrical conduit running through the concrete walls. As the afternoon wore on and Danny continued digging, he uncovered what was unmistakably a steel access hatch set into the concrete. The hatch was about 4 feet square, with heavy-duty hinges and a locking mechanism that looked like it belonged on a submarine or military facility. Thor had remained at Danny's side throughout the excavation, never losing interest in whatever he was detecting below ground. The dog's persistent attention convinced Danny that there was something significant in the underground space. Possibly explosives, weapons, or other materials Thor had been trained to identify. The hatch was secured with a wheel lock mechanism that was corroded but still functional. Danny applied penetrating oil to the locking system and worked it carefully until he was able to turn the wheel and lift the heavy steel cover. Below the hatch was a steel ladder descending into complete darkness. The air that rose from the opening was stale and dry, with faint odors of machine oil, electronic equipment, and something else Danny couldn't quite identify, a metallic, ozone-like smell that reminded him of high-voltage electrical equipment. Danny retrieved a powerful LED flashlight from his truck and shined it down into the opening. The ladder descended approximately 15 feet to what appeared to be a concrete floor. The walls of the shaft were lined with steel plating, and he could see the edges of what looked like a much larger chamber beyond the bottom of the ladder. "This is either going to be really interesting or really dangerous," Danny said to Thor. "Probably both." Danny returned to the farmhouse and gathered proper equipment for underground exploration. Multiple flashlights, work gloves, a first aid kit, his cell phone, a digital camera, and Thor's tactical harness and working vest. If they were going to explore an unknown underground facility, Danny wanted both of them properly equipped. Thor was eager to descend, displaying the kind of focused enthusiasm he'd shown during military operations when he knew important work was ahead. Danny tested the ladder structure carefully, then descended first, with Thor following immediately behind. What Danny found at the bottom of the ladder was unlike anything he had expected. The access shaft opened into a rectangular chamber, approximately 30 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 10 feet high. The entire space was lined with steel plating, and the floor was polished concrete with embedded drainage systems. But what filled the chamber was absolutely extraordinary. The room was clearly some kind of command and control center, filled with electronic equipment that appeared to date from the 1960s and 1970s. Along one wall were banks of radio equipment, monitoring devices, teletype machines, and what appeared to be early computer terminals. Everything was covered with a fine layer of dust, but appeared to be in excellent condition, as if the facility had been carefully sealed and preserved. Another wall was dominated by large plotting boards, map cases, and communication panels with hundreds of switches, indicators, and monitoring screens. In the center of the room was a large conference table with built-in lighting and what appeared to be plotting equipment used for tracking coordinates and movement patterns. But it was the third wall that made Danny's hands shake as he swept his flashlight beam across it. The entire surface was covered with maps, charts, and documents, many bearing official U.S. government seals and security classifications ranging from confidential to top secret. Even in the dim light, Danny could make out references to North American Air Defense Command, Strategic Air Command, DEFCON protocols, and nuclear response procedures. Thor had moved deeper into the chamber and was exhibiting even stronger detection behavior, focusing on specific equipment cabinets and storage areas along the far wall. Danny realized that his partner was likely detecting traces of explosives, weapons, or other hazardous materials that might be stored in the facility. Danny began examining the equipment and documentation more systematically, using his camera to document everything he found. The facility was clearly some kind of military command post, but the level of sophistication suggested it had been far more than a simple communications center. One bank of equipment was labeled BMWS Interface, which Danny knew stood for Ballistic Missile Early Warning System. Another section was marked SAC Command Relay and appeared to be designed for communicating directly with Strategic Air Command headquarters and nuclear-armed bomber squadrons. But the most shocking discovery came when Danny found a personnel roster posted on a bulletin board near what appeared to be the facility commander's station. The document was yellowed with age but still perfectly legible, and the name at the top made Danny sit down hard on the concrete floor. Rodriguez Miguel S., Master Sergeant, U.S. Army Signal Corps, Facility Commander, Emergency Operations Center Charlie 7, Security Clearance, Top Secret, SCI, Assignment 1962-1987. His grandfather had been the commanding officer of this secret military installation for 25 years. Danny stared at the document, his mind reeling. Miguel Rodriguez, the quiet farmer who had rarely spoken about his past, had actually been operating one of the most classified military facilities in the country for a quarter of a century. The man Danny had known as a simple, hard-working grandfather had been living a double life as a critical component of America's nuclear defense network. Thor seemed to sense Danny's emotional state and moved closer, providing the comfort and support that military working dogs were trained to offer their handlers during stressful situations. Danny continued his exploration of the facility, each discovery adding new layers to the incredible story. In what appeared to be the facility commander's office, he found a desk containing personal items that clearly belonged to his grandfather. A coffee mug with "World's Best Grandpa" printed on it, family photographs including pictures of Danny as a child, and a small American flag that showed signs of having been handled frequently over many years. But it was the contents of the desk drawers that truly revealed the scope of Miguel Rodriguez's secret life. Danny found operational logs dating back to 1962, documenting everything from routine equipment maintenance to high alert periods during major international crises. October 22, 1962, Cuban Missile Crisis, Day 1, facility placed on DEFCON 2. All personnel recalled to emergency stations, maintained continuous communication with SAC headquarters and NORAD. President Kennedy addressing the nation tonight. God help us all if this escalates. November 9, 1965, Northeast blackout. Facility operating on backup power. Monitoring for potential Soviet involvement in power grid failure. False alarm, but maintained heightened alert for 72 hours. Maria thinks I'm working overtime at the factory again. January 21st, 1968, USS Pueblo seized by North Korea. Facility activated for potential crisis response. Coordinated with NSA for communication intercept analysis. Haven't been home in 3 days. told Maria I have the flu. Entry after entry revealed the enormous burden Miguel Rodriguez had carried in secret. For 25 years, he had been responsible for maintaining one of the most critical links in America's nuclear command and control system, all while living the cover life of a simple factory worker and farmer. Danny discovered that the facility had been part of a network of secret command posts established during the height of the Cold War, designed to ensure continuity of military command and control in the event of nuclear attack on primary military installations. Each facility was staffed by a small team of specially selected personnel who maintained civilian cover jobs while actually serving in highly classified military roles. The facility contained everything necessary for extended independent operations during a national emergency. Danny found storage areas filled with military rations, water purification equipment, backup generators, medical supplies, and even a small armory containing weapons and ammunition. But perhaps most remarkably, the facility contained an extensive archive of Cold War intelligence materials. In the secure vault room that required a separate combination lock, Danny found files documenting Soviet military capabilities, satellite reconnaissance photographs, intelligence reports from American agents operating behind the Iron Curtain, and communication intercepts from Soviet military facilities. Some of the intelligence materials were so sensitive that they were still marked with handling restrictions and distribution limitations. Danny realized he was looking at information that had shaped American foreign and defense policy during some of the most dangerous moments of the Cold War. Thor had made a discovery of his own. The dog had been investigating a section of the vault room and had begun pawing at what appeared to be a loose floor panel. When Danny pried up the panel, he found a hidden compartment containing items that took his breath away. Inside the compartment was a collection of military decorations and commendations that had never been publicly presented. There was a Distinguished Service Cross, multiple Bronze Stars, several commendation medals, and at the very bottom of the collection, wrapped in a cloth bearing the presidential seal, was a Congressional Medal of Honor. The citation for the Medal of Honor was dated 1963 and read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty while serving in a classified capacity of vital importance to national security. Master Sergeant Rodriguez's extraordinary heroism and selfless dedication to duty during extended periods of extreme danger prevented potentially catastrophic compromise of critical defense systems and saved countless American lives." There was no specific description of what Miguel Rodriguez had done to earn the nation's highest military honor, but Danny understood that the classified nature of his grandfather's service had prevented public recognition of his heroism. Beside the medals, Danny found a leather-bound journal that Miguel had kept throughout his years of covert service. The entries provided an intimate look at the personal cost of living such a profoundly secret life. December 24th, 1963, Christmas Eve. But I'm here monitoring Soviet submarine movements in the Atlantic. Family thinks I'm sick with stomach flu. Maria made my favorite tamales, but I can't go home to eat them. These are the sacrifices that come with this job. Sometimes I wonder if my family will ever understand why I'm so absent. July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon today. Historic day for America, but I'm here tracking Soviet reactions to the Apollo landing. Danny's father graduated high school this week, missed the ceremony because of a crisis alert. He thinks his old man doesn't care about his achievements. If only he knew what his old man really does for a living. November 4th, 1979. American hostages taken in Iran. Facility on high alert for potential Soviet involvement. Haven't been home in 4 days. Maria is starting to ask more questions about my work. Getting harder to maintain the cover story after all these years. December 25th, 1981, Christmas Day, but monitoring increased Soviet military activity in Eastern Europe. Danny enlisted in the army last month, so proud of that boy and terrified that he might end up in a job like mine. This life takes everything from you, but someone has to do it. October 3rd, 1987. Final entry. Facility officially deactivated after 25 years of operation. Cold War winding down, they say. New technology making installations like this obsolete. Mixed feelings about closing this chapter of my life. This place has been more home than home for 2 decades. But maybe now I can finally be the husband and father my family deserves. Danny wiped tears from his eyes as he read his grandfather's words. He was finally understanding why Miguel Rodriguez had always seemed distant and preoccupied during Danny's childhood. It wasn't indifference or lack of caring. It was the weight of carrying enormous responsibility that he could never share with his family. As Danny continued exploring the facility, he found evidence that Miguel Rodriguez hadn't been working alone. There were personnel records for a rotating staff of technicians, analysts, and security personnel, all of whom had maintained civilian cover identities while serving in the secret installation. The facility had operated around the clock for 25 years, with teams working in shifts to ensure continuous monitoring and communication capabilities. During periods of international crisis, the entire staff would be activated and could remain underground for weeks if necessary. Danny found detailed operational procedures for various emergency scenarios, including protocols for nuclear attack, foreign invasion, and catastrophic natural disasters. The facility was designed to continue functioning even if primary government and military command centers were destroyed. But the facility contained another section that Danny hadn't initially noticed. Thor had begun exhibiting detection behavior near what appeared to be a blank wall section, and closer inspection revealed that it was actually a concealed door. Behind the hidden door was a corridor that led to additional chambers, including what appeared to be living quarters for the facility's staff. There were small bedrooms, a kitchen and dining area, a recreation room, and even a small medical facility equipped for basic surgery and trauma care. The living quarters revealed more personal aspects of the secret life Miguel Rodriguez and his team had lived. In what was clearly his grandfather's private room, Danny found personal items that spanned decades, letters from family members, photographs of Danny and his father at various ages, birthday cards that had never been sent, and Christmas presents that had been purchased but never given. One shoebox contained dozens of letters that Miguel had written to his family over the years but had never sent, letters explaining his real work and expressing his regret for the deception he had been forced to maintain. A letter addressed to Danny's grandmother was particularly moving. "My dearest Maria, if you are reading this, it means I am gone and someone has discovered my real work. For 30 years, I have been lying to you about what I do for a living. I've not been a simple factory worker putting in overtime. I've been serving our country in one of the most critical and most secret roles in the American military. Every time I disappeared for days or weeks, telling you I was working extra shifts or attending training courses, I was actually here in this underground facility helping to protect America from nuclear attack. Every family dinner I missed, every birthday celebration I couldn't attend, every holiday when I claimed to be sick, I was actually here, serving our nation in ways I could never tell you about. I know you suspected something. You're too intelligent and observant not to have noticed the inconsistencies in my stories, but you never pushed for answers, and I've always been grateful for that trust, even though I knew I didn't deserve it. The work I have done here has been the most important of my life, but it has also cost me the chance to be the husband you deserved. I have missed so much of our life together because of my duty to this country. I hope someday you can understand that these sacrifices were necessary to protect the freedom you and our family have enjoyed." Danny found similar letters addressed to his father and even one addressed to Danny himself. "Dear Danny, you probably won't remember your old grandfather very well by the time you read this, but I want you to know that you have been the light of my life during some very dark times. When I was stuck in this bunker during international crises, worrying about whether the world was about to end in nuclear fire, I would look at your pictures and remember what I was fighting to preserve. You come from a family of soldiers, boy. Your father served his country with honor, and now you're following in his footsteps. I hope you never have to serve in the shadows like I did, carrying secrets that separate you from the people you love. But if duty calls you to that kind of service, I hope you'll understand why your grandfather made the choices he made. The emotional weight of these discoveries was overwhelming, but Danny forced himself to continue documenting everything he found. This wasn't just his family's history. It was American history that had been hidden for decades. In the facility's communication center, Danny found logs of every major international incident from 1962 to 1987, seen from the perspective of the American intelligence community. There were real-time reports of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Vietnam War escalation, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the downing of Korean Airlines Flight 007, and dozens of other events that had shaped the course of the Cold War. The facility had also served as a relay point for intelligence gathered by American spy satellites, reconnaissance aircraft, and human agents operating behind the Iron Curtain. Danny found detailed analyses of Soviet missile capabilities, assessments of Warsaw Pact military readiness, and estimates of nuclear arsenal strengths that had informed American defense policy for decades. But perhaps most sobering were the contingency plans for nuclear war. The facility contained detailed procedures for coordinating American nuclear response in various attack scenarios, including target lists, launch sequences, and post-attack recovery operations. Danny realized that his grandfather and the small team of personnel who had staffed this facility had literally held the survival of American civilization in their hands for 25 years. As evening approached, and Danny prepared to leave the facility, Thor made one more significant discovery. The dog had been investigating a storage area that Danny had initially overlooked, and he began exhibiting the intense detection behavior that indicated hazardous materials. Inside the storage area, Danny found a collection of items that explained Thor's reaction. There were Geiger counters, radiation detection equipment, and what appeared to be samples of radioactive materials used for testing and calibration purposes. There were also chemical detection kits, biological agent identification equipment, and protective gear for handling various types of weapons of mass destruction. The facility had apparently been equipped to detect and analyze evidence of nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons programs by foreign adversaries. Some of the equipment was still functional, and Danny realized that Thor was detecting residual traces of the hazardous materials that had been handled here over the years. Danny carefully secured the hazardous materials area and made detailed notes about everything Thor had detected. This discovery added another layer of complexity to an already extraordinary find. The facility hadn't just been a command and control center. It had been a sophisticated intelligence analysis station capable of identifying and assessing weapons of mass destruction. As Danny and Thor finally climbed back up the ladder to ground level, Danny's mind was reeling from everything they had discovered. The quiet farm he had inherited from his grandfather was actually the site of one of the most important and most secret military installations of the Cold War era. But beyond the historical significance, Danny had gained a completely new understanding of the grandfather he thought he had known. Miguel Rodriguez hadn't been a distant, preoccupied farmer. He had been a hero, carrying an enormous burden of responsibility that he could never share with his family. That evening, Danny sat in his grandfather's old farmhouse kitchen, looking at the phone and trying to decide who to call about his discovery. This was clearly material that involved national security, classified information, and potentially hazardous materials that required proper handling by qualified authorities. But Danny also understood that this discovery represented more than just historical artifacts. It was evidence of an entire generation of Americans who had made extraordinary sacrifices for national security, sacrifices that had never been publicly acknowledged or honored. Finally, Danny called the one person he trusted to handle the situation with appropriate discretion and respect, his former commanding officer, Colonel Patricia Martinez, who now worked in the Pentagon's Historical Classification Review Office. "Colonel Martinez, this is Danny Rodriguez. I need to speak with you about something I've discovered that involves classified materials, national security, and American military history that I think the country needs to know about." After Danny explained his discovery in detail, Colonel Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "Danny, if what you're telling me is accurate, you've made one of the most significant historical discoveries in modern American military history," she said finally. "These Cold War command facilities were among the most classified operations of their era. Most records of their existence were destroyed when the network was deactivated in the late 1980s. "What should I do, ma'am?" Danny asked. "First, secure the site completely and don't allow anyone else to access it until we can get a team there. Second, I need to make immediate contact with the Defense Department's Classification Review Board, the National Archives, and probably the CIA. Third, pack a bag for an extended stay. You're going to have some very important visitors, and this is going to take considerable time to sort out properly." "One more thing, Colonel," Danny said. "My grandfather spent 25 years serving his country in complete secrecy, never receiving any recognition for what he did. I want to make sure that when this story comes out, he and the other personnel who served in these facilities get the honor they deserve. Danny, I can promise you that will happen. These men and women were among the most important and most unrecognized heroes of the Cold War. It's time their service was acknowledged." Over the following 2 weeks, Danny's quiet farm became the center of intense but carefully managed activity. A joint team from the Pentagon, CIA, National Security Agency, and National Archives arrived to examine the facility and catalog its contents. The team was led by Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a historian specializing in Cold War military operations, and General Robert Chen, who had been involved in the original design and implementation of the secret facility network in the early 1960s. "Mr. Rodriguez, your grandfather was part of what we called the Ghost Network," General Chen explained to Danny. "These facilities were our insurance policy against nuclear decapitation strikes. If the Soviets had successfully destroyed Washington, the Pentagon, SAC headquarters, and NORAD, installations like this one would have been the backbone of American survival and retaliation." Dr. Morrison was equally impressed by the completeness of the facility and its records. "What you've found here is a perfectly preserved Cold War time capsule. Most of these installations were completely stripped and sanitized when they were deactivated. This facility is providing us with insights into Cold War operations that we thought were lost forever." But the most significant aspect of the discovery wasn't the equipment or intelligence materials. It was the documentation of the personnel who had operated the facility. General Chen had personally known Miguel Rodriguez during the early years of the Ghost Network's operation. "Your grandfather was one of the most trusted and capable officers in the entire program," he told Danny. "He was hand-picked for this assignment because of his technical expertise, his unquestioned loyalty, and his ability to maintain operational security under extreme pressure. These facilities required personnel who could live double lives for decades without compromising their missions or their cover identities. Miguel Rodriguez and people like him were the unsung heroes of the Cold War. They couldn't receive public recognition for their service because that would have compromised the security of the entire network." The Pentagon team spent 3 weeks systematically cataloging everything in the facility. They found that it contained not only historical materials and intelligence archives, but also equipment and information that was still considered sensitive for national security reasons. However, they also made a decision that would have profound implications for how the discovery was handled. Rather than simply classifying everything and sealing the facility again, they chose to work with Danny to create a controlled disclosure that would honor the service of people like Miguel Rodriguez, while protecting information that still needed to remain secret. These men and women gave their entire adult lives to protecting America during the most dangerous period in human history, Dr. Morrison explained. They served without recognition, without public acknowledgement, and often without their own families understanding the importance of what they were doing. The Cold War ended over 30 years ago. It's time the American people learned about the sacrifices that were made to preserve their freedom. General Chen agreed. The specific operational details and intelligence sources need to remain classified, but the story of these facilities and the people who operated them can and should be told. These Americans deserve recognition for their service. Danny worked closely with the Pentagon team to develop a plan for revealing the discovery while protecting sensitive information. They would create a historical exhibit that would honor his grandfather's service and educate the public about the secret network of facilities that had helped protect America during the Cold War. But the discovery had implications beyond historical recognition. The investigation of Miguel Rodriguez's facility led to the identification of 17 other similar installations that were still intact and sealed across the United States. Dr. Morrison coordinated a national effort to locate and document these sites, many of which were found on private property owned by descendants of the personnel who had operated them. Each discovery revealed new pieces of the Cold War story and provided evidence of the enormous scope of the secret network that had protected America for nearly 3 decades. 6 months after Danny and Thor's initial discovery, the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History opened a major new exhibit titled America's Secret Guardians, the Cold War Underground. The exhibit featured a full-scale replica of Miguel Rodriguez's command center, complete with period-accurate equipment and interactive displays explaining the role these facilities had played in national defense. Visitors could experience what it was like to work in one of these underground installations during a nuclear crisis. But the centerpiece of the exhibit was a memorial wall honoring the personnel who had served in the secret facilities. Miguel Rodriguez's name was prominently displayed, along with his previously classified service record and the Medal of Honor citation that had never been publicly presented. Danny was invited to speak at the exhibit's grand opening, where he shared his grandfather's story with a crowd that included Secretary of Defense, the Director of the CIA, several members of Congress, and dozens of families whose relatives had served in similar facilities. My grandfather spent 25 years protecting America from nuclear destruction, Danny told the audience. He couldn't tell his family what he was really doing, couldn't receive public recognition for his service, and couldn't share the enormous burden he was carrying. But he served anyway because he understood that freedom isn't free, and that sometimes the price must be paid by people whose names we never know. Thor, wearing his military working dog vest and a special medal recognizing his role in the discovery, sat beside Danny during the ceremony. The dog had become something of a national celebrity, featured in news stories and documentaries about the bunker discovery. The exhibit drew unprecedented crowds, with visitors from around the world coming to learn about America's secret Cold War heroes. But the most moving responses came from family members of personnel who had served in similar facilities. Children and grandchildren who had grown up thinking their relatives were distant or secretive finally learned the truth about their family members' hidden service. Many families donated their relatives' personal papers and military decorations to the museum, adding to the growing collection of Cold War artifacts. The discovery also sparked a national conversation about the recognition of classified service. Congress passed the Hidden Heroes Recognition Act, establishing a process for declassifying and honoring military service that had been previously unacknowledged due to security restrictions. The Department of Defense created the Silent Service Medal to recognize personnel who had served in classified capacities during the Cold War, and the first recipient was posthumously awarded to Master Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez. For Danny, the most meaningful result of the discovery was deeply personal. He had finally understood his grandfather and had been able to share that understanding with the world. "My grandfather wasn't absent because he didn't care about his family," Danny explained to reporters covering the exhibit opening. "He was absent because he cared so much about protecting our freedom that he was willing to sacrifice his own recognition and family time to serve in secret." The farm in Pennsylvania was eventually converted into a permanent historical site, with the underground facility restored and opened for guided tours by appointment. Danny served as the primary guide and curator, sharing his grandfather's story and explaining the role these secret installations had played in protecting America. Thor, now 8 years old, continued to work alongside Danny as an educational ambassador and historical detection specialist. The dog had helped locate several additional Cold War artifacts on the property and had inspired the creation of new programs using specially trained dogs to locate historical sites. But the impact of the discovery extended far beyond historical recognition. The revelation of the Ghost Network and its personnel had reminded Americans that their freedom had been protected by ordinary people who made extraordinary sacrifices, often without recognition and often without their families ever knowing the full extent of their service. The story had also highlighted the ongoing importance of military working dogs and the special bond between veterans and their canine partners. Thor's role in the discovery had demonstrated that these animals were more than just pets or tools. They were partners whose unique abilities could contribute to understanding and preserving history. 2 years after the initial discovery, Danny received a letter that brought the story full circle. It was from his grandmother, Maria Rodriguez, who was 91 years old and living in an assisted care facility in Florida. "My dear grandson," the letter read, "I have lived with Miguel's secrets for 70 years. I always knew he was doing something more important than factory work. The phone calls at odd hours, the mysterious disappearances, the way he would wake up at night listening to sounds no one else could hear. I knew my husband was carrying a burden bigger than anything he could share with me. I never asked questions because I loved him, and I trusted him completely. If Miguel said he was serving our country, then I knew he was serving our country. I just never understood how important that service really was, or what it cost him to keep it secret. Thank you for discovering the truth and sharing it with the world. Your grandfather would be so proud to know that his service is finally being recognized and that his grandson is carrying on the family tradition of serving others. P.S. I always said that dog of yours was special. Miguel would have recognized Thor as a kindred spirit, someone who knows how to find what needs to be found." Danny framed his grandmother's letter and displayed it in the museum exhibit, adding it to the growing collection of personal stories that helped visitors understand the human cost of secret service. The discovery had taught Danny that heroism takes many forms, and that the most important heroes are often those whose service requires them to remain anonymous and unrecognized. But it had also taught him that eventually the truth has a way of coming to light, usually when the right person and the right dog are in the right place at the right time. As Danny continued to give tours of the facility and share his grandfather's story, he was reminded daily that freedom is protected not just by those who serve in public, but by those who serve in the shadows, making sacrifices that even their own families may never fully understand until years or decades later. The bunker that Thor had discovered had indeed shocked the country, but not because it contained weapons or gold. It had shocked America because it revealed the depth of commitment that ordinary citizens had made to protect their fellow Americans. Without expectation of recognition, without hope of praise, and often without their families ever knowing the true nature of their sacrifice. And in a world where heroism was often associated with public recognition and media attention, the story of Miguel Rodriguez and thousands of others like him served as a powerful reminder that the most important service is often the kind that requires silence, secrecy, and selflessness. The forgotten bunker had revealed more than Cold War secrets. It had revealed the true meaning of patriotism and the depth of sacrifice that defines the American spirit. And Atlas, the military working dog, who had made it all possible, continued to serve alongside his partner, proving that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most important discoveries are made by those who are trained to look for what others might miss. In the end, the story of the bunker wasn't just about the past. It was about the ongoing commitment that Americans make to protect each other, often in ways that are never seen, never acknowledged, and never fully understood until someone with the right training and the right partner stumbles upon the evidence of their service. And that, Danny realized, was the most important discovery of all. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of discovery, sacrifice, and recognition. If Danny and Thor's story of uncovering hidden heroes touched your heart like it touched ours, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more amazing stories of forgotten history and unsung patriots. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest content. What did you think about Miguel Rodriguez's 25 years of Secret Service? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to share this story with others who need to be reminded that true heroes often serve in silence, protecting freedoms that others may never know were in danger. Their sacrifice deserves our remembrance, our gratitude, and our commitment to ensuring that such service is never truly forgotten.